Morning, class. Good morning. Good morning. Today, we're going to talk from this book by Gardy, Electronic Health Records. We're going to speak out of chapter 4. We're going to lecture from that. I'm going to give this book back to my lovely student. Thank you, Shaylee. And so we're going to start talking about the parts and pieces and how to put it all together in electronic health records. And hopefully in this chapter, it should talk about meaningful use. I made mention about meaningful use yesterday. I'm not sure if I did it on the YouTube lecture, but I did talk about it briefly, maybe once before, maybe a little bit yesterday. But nevertheless, I will elaborate on it today. Okay, so give me a minute. Is that your computer? Oh. Okay, so familiarity with electronic health records, chapter 4. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is applying your knowledge. So in this chapter, you will practice documenting patient visits using the student edition software. One of the goals of this chapter is to increase your familiarity with the software and thereby increase your speed of data. Because it's real important to increase your speed of data, putting in information. So once we start going page by page, block by block of what you're putting in, then at some point this qualifies you with a job called a scribe. Okay, a scribe. Have y'all ever seen a person walk in a doctor's office and the doctor walks in and his nurse or his electronic medical records person has the laptop, and while he's talking, she's recording and documenting all that information? Those are called scribes, okay? Because the doctors, he wants to focus more on patient care. He doesn't want to have to deal with, or she doesn't want to have to deal with where to put this and where to put that in the system. Your job as a scribe, should you choose to find a job like that, it's electronic medical records, is to record what the doctor is saying. So you know appropriately what conversation should take place under S for subjective, what conversation should take place as O as objective, what conversations or where the diagnosis and the procedure code should go where in what part of the software? Assessment, very good. And then plan speaks of, if they're going to be referred to a specialist, if they're coming back to see the doctor in another 2 weeks, what medications that they're being given. Okay, so and with maybe some labs before they come back for the next visit or upon the next visit when they come back. Okay, that's called plan. Okay, very good. So that's what scribes do. So if you like typing really fast and recording information, and then once the scribes finish all of that, they're the ones next to the coders. They help bring all the information together to make sure that what the coders code is correct. Okay, and then the scribes also make sure that all the documentation are written in such a fashion and clearly said to where, in case there's an audit from the insurance company, in case there's an audit from HEDIS. Thank you. Okay, yeah, that's what Miss Sharon usually does.
I didn't know, but
Yeah.
She's on vacation.
I didn't know.
But I want you to stay the kid.
Okay.
And then When you finish, stop that.
Yes, sir.
Should take the key to the front desk.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Appreciate you very much. Thank you.
And that's it?
That is it.
Okay,
Yeah,
now,
it said not outlet that the current is not working in there. So I think they're doing work in there, right?
right, and I went ahead and called IT.
Okay.
Come on, check out it.
Okay.
Because I
Okay.
know you got the call.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you,
Okay, I'm working on
sweetie.
it.
God bless you. Thank you. And so if you're looking for those type of jobs, you can do that. And so in case HEDIS comes back and audit, you know how things should be. And so I'm going to have y'all to look up HEDIS, and I hope I have the acronyms correct. I think it is HEIDS, those acronyms. So if you Google that, when you get a chance, you get to read about how they audit EMRs and coding. Okay, procedure coding, diagnosis coding, because everything that you document has to make sense and justify why that 99204 is there, why that lab was there. The onset has to match what the doctor is caring for the patient, meaning that the review of systems, there's how many systems of the body? 12. Very good. Thank you, ladies. 12. And so if a person comes in with coughing, headaches, runny nose, they have a lot of phlegm coming up when they blow their nose and they cough. You can hear the congestion in their chest. So the system of the body they're going to review is respiratory system. What else are you going to say? The immune system, very good. They're going to check the immune system by looking at the mucus. Is it clear? Is it green? Okay. They got to make sure, because if it's green, oh, it's working. It's working. I hear the computer. I hear the copier. Yeah, the projectors are working too. Thank you so much. Thank you, loves. Thank you. If it's green or if it's yellow, you have boogers, dried mucus, coming out your nose and stuff like that. I mean, there's an infection in there. So the doctor got to give you some antibiotics, okay? Or maybe if it's something viral, you just have to do some natural homeopathic things to let the virus wear itself out. And the doctor still may give you something to prescribe for that. I don't think it's antibiotics, but he may give you some other things to handle viral infections, okay? Viral and bacterial are two different types of things. All right, so there is a job market for that documentation specialist. That's what they're called, for electronic medical records. There is a certification for that on the AHIMA website, okay? So if you're interested, Google that and look into it. All right, so chapter 3, you learned the basic layout of the screen. Have y'all learned the basic layout of the screen? We'll go through that together. We'll go through that together. Creating encounter notes, adding findings, editing findings, adding details to findings, detailed instructions for scrolling, navigating the list, which were provided in the previous chapter, should no longer be necessary. So from this point forward, simplified instructions shall guide you in areas where you are already familiar with the program. So what is this doing, chapter by chapter, layer by layer, is taking you through to make sure everything is working, so that you learn it layer by layer. At the end of chapter, when you get to chapter 12 of the final test, you should kind of memorize it and know where things are located. Now, the medicine software on here is an example software for you to work on, for you to practice. It's same or similar to other software products that are out there, like eClinical, ZocDocs, other EHR products, but at least you're familiar with things are. They may have it set up a little bit different because of business, because of competition, because of its own brand. Okay, so anytime there's business, there's going to be competition. You got to kind of one up on yours to see what makes your stuff, your product better than the competitors. Okay, so all right, so the exercises in this book are intended to provide conceptual learning experiences with the software. The encounter notes you will produce will be similar to documents you would create in a medical office. However, they are not intended to represent full and complete medical exams. The exercises, although medically accurate, have been purposely shortened to ensure you can complete an exercise in this period. Okay, are we getting close to the expiration date? No. Y'all have your own scratch off. That's for the SEMO book. Okay. Okay. Woo. All right. I teach the same thing, but at night, except theirs is different. Okay. So tips for completing the exercises. It is important to remember is that the student edition software does not save your entries to the patient's permanent record. Therefore, you cannot quit an exercise, then resume when you left off. If you quit an exercise or exit or refresh the browser before clicking submit for a grade, you will lose all your work you have done on that exercise. Are y'all getting that? So it's real important that I read that to you. So any exercise that you begin, and I remember my Fort Bend students, my West Loop students, they had that issue too, where they had to finish everything. So sometimes you may have to stay 15 or so minutes after class if you start a project, and try to finish it. If not, you'll lose it. And then sometimes you can print up the paper just as a backup. I would, because some students had an issue, and I discovered it on my end as a teacher looking at it on the system, where they say, Ms. Harper, I submitted it, but I don't see it. Okay, that does happen. So I advise you guys, let me know if y'all, the printer works on y'all laptop on here, because it's supposed to be Bluetooth ready, I think. If not, I have to call Jose. Okay, and I understand that something is wrong with the Wi-Fi channels, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The exercise in this book have been designed to be completed in the class time allotted by your instructor. However, should you become necessary to quit an exercise before completing it and submitting it for a grade, you can keep a record of your work by printing it. Just said that. Okay. Remember, you can print it out or download as PDF. You can do that on the encounter note as frequently as you like. You can save it to your hard drive of your personal laptop if y'all want to, and then just print it for me later and get it to me later. That's fine. At any time during the exercise. Now, I think because you all put in your own voucher numbers and y'all work on this, do y'all work on this from home? Do y'all try to work on this from home? Okay. If you do work on this from home, you can save it on your hard drive, or even at the library. You can save it on the hard drive and email it to me, or put it on your USB stick and you can upload it on your computer then. Okay? If you cannot complete an exercise, use the Create PDF option to print out your work before quitting. On this printout, write the step you left on. When you return to the exercise, recording the findings on the printout may help you quickly get back to the point at which you quit. Okay? All right. So documenting a brief patient visit. This exercise will allow you to evaluate your knowledge on the software by using only features you have learned in Chapter 3. If you have any difficulty with this exercise, you should review the exercise in Chapter 3 before continuing with this chapter. So I'm going to let y'all follow through on that. Then it gives you tips on the right-click mouse button. Be sure that you read that. And then it has exercises 4A 4A, wow, it's long. It goes all the way, woo! It goes all the way to page 125. Okay, to page 125. Okay, so visually different EHR styles. The QUIP student edition software, I'm on page 125, has been especially modified for this course. Therefore, it may differ from some aspects of the EHR systems you will encounter when working in a medical facility. But the concept, skills, and familiarity with the EHR systems you will acquire by practicing the student edition will transfer directly in the workplace. Many EHR software packages are based on the medicine nomenclature. Okay. Each vendor has created a unique visual style. Although there is a common nomenclature, the EHR may look quite different. Nomenclature is like a library, okay, a library of information. Okay. Um, One difference is the look of buttons. Instead of Y and N buttons you have used thus far, many systems use round and square buttons that do not contain letters. But when clicked to record a finding, the buttons turn red or blue, just as the findings have done in the preceding exercise. So have y'all noticed that? Okay, very good. Very, very good. Very, very good. Now, look at figure 4-11. It has alternative style of buttons used to record findings in another EHR system. So you have the plus button. Um, uh, okay, see that small plus button? That small plus button means that it has additional subsets underneath there. Okay, so when you click that small plus sign to the left, then that plus sign right there in the middle, it's going to have other subsets, and that plus sign in the middle attached to that subset. Okay, now when you click on, let's see, one of the subsets of that secondary plus sign, then it'll open up a third subset. Are y'all getting that? So it kind of reminds you of diagnostic coding, where you have the main term, then the what subterm, and then the what subterm of a subterm, and then gets more defined, and it be a subterm of a what subterm. Okay, so it's kind of treed. You're going to understand the language of EHR. It's going to tell you what tree to look under. So there's a main tree, then there's a branch, and then there's a sub branch. Okay, so it's kind of like that. So when you open up that small plus sign, the small plus sign says, I have subsets under here. Click me so you can see all my subsets. Okay, so when you click, it's going to open up all these subsets. Then you have the bigger plus sign, and each one of those subsets says, I have more subsets. Click one of me. So if you click one of them, then it's going to open up smaller size subsets. And then it'll have the minus sign, where the minus sign next to it says, stop, that's all I got. Okay. Okay, so that at least it gives you a fundamental idea what to look for. I'm so glad that they have, I say this all the time, have written it to me in this fashion so that you all will understand what you're looking for. Okay, so this is just foundational knowledge, but again, when you get out there and start doing the work, you'll understand what to look for. Okay. All right. So an example was shown in 3-5. One EHR goes further and uses a large plus symbol and a large minus sign, similar to those shown in figure -11, just said that, to record findings as normal or abnormal. It is also possible to record findings by putting a check mark in a box. As you learned in previous exercise, most QUIP findings can be selected by clicking on the words of a clinical concept, allowing template designers to dispense with buttons altogether. Although various EHR vendors present different interfaces, the functionality of a of quickly documenting a patient encounter by clicking on clinical concepts instead of typing extensive is free text is common by them. By becoming familiar with the student edition software, you should have no trouble transitioning to any medicine-based EHR on your job. Now it has a long case here, exercise 4B, recording findings using alternative methods. So we're going to skip that. Um, yes, it's a long one. Ooh, let's go to step 23. Ooh, 25. Okay, so now it's talking about critical check notes. Let's go back for a minute because I'm looking for some things to really lecture on. Meaningful use was one of them, and I don't know. Let me go to the index here, the back of the book. I really wanted to talk about meaningful use. I have to find it. If it's too early for me to talk, then I'll wait. Let's see, meaningful use. Meaningful use. Okay, page 8 and 10. Okay. So it's page 8 and 10. Okay, so it must be in chapter 1. So I will go back and revisit that so I can talk about that. Let's look at the real life story on page 126. On page 126, A Nurse's Notes by Cheryl Beal, RN, MSN. Cheryl Beal, okay, well, that's about the author. Okay, so let's read. Our hospital has successfully transitioned all nursing units to computerized patient charts. We rolled it over very slowly, one unit at a time, by taking 3 years to implement all areas. Today, all inpatient units are online, including our behavioral health units. We do not print nursing reports. Everyone works online. These are some of the experiences and observations from this project. We did med-surg first because it is the broadest definition and fits the majority of patients. When that model was in operation, we went to the next unit and asked, with this as a model, what do we need to do to make it work for you? We did a fair amount of redesign as we added units, but sometimes they were minor changes like adding descriptors that had not been necessary for another unit. The first thing we did for all departments was to spend considerable time flow charting all their processes, how they get with their patients, how they communicate about their patients, with whom, what it is like. We created a life in the day of scenario for every skill level in the unit. Then we designed their charting based on their patient population. The last unit to go online was behavioral health. Behavioral health was challenging because this department's charts contain more abstract information or observations describing mental reactions, emotional reactions, and so on. But the most problematic unit was the obstetrics department. OB charting is not difficult, but it is very meticulous. Our OB department had a lot of rules and regulations about what had to be charted and how it was to be worded. The hospital legal department had to review all of our designs before the nurses could begin using them. They then reviewed samples of what they actually being documented once the department went online. We had to do some redesign to let the nurses better describe things, but we finally got it to everyone's satisfaction. That was our design process. Implementation was another process. So design and implementation. So let's write that on the board. Talk about that in a minute. And this is part of our responsibility as well in the health information management technology field, careers. If you choose to go further in this, okay, we help, word help, we help design the interfaces of the EMR for medical staff. Okay? And once we help, then we have to, actually, the thing of it is you have to test it. You have to test it to see if it works. Okay? Test it to see if it works. Then, if it does work, then we need to do what? Implement it. Okay? We need to implement it. Okay? And you do this system-wide. Okay? And then once you implement it into the system, okay, into the hospital IT system, then you have to do some what? Training. You have to do some training, okay? Training of staff, you know, and the staff can be clinical, the clinical staff. When I say clinical staff, I'm speaking of the physicians, I'm speaking of the nurses, I'm speaking of all allied health. When I say allied health, I'm talking about like your histology techs, your laboratory people, your radiology people, your physical therapy people. That's all considered allied health. Okay. All right. So that's how that goes. That's how that goes. So when you're doing this, all this plays a role in creating a functional electronic medical record according to the brand. When I say brand, I'm talking about, for example, like Epic, okay, eClinical, ZocDocs, okay, those people, okay, because sometimes they can have an electronic medical record package, but they have to cater it or they have to make it personal to that particular hospital. Remember, hospitals, healthcare is a business. Hospitals are places of what? Business. It's a place of business for what? To take care of who? Sick people. Okay? All right. So in creating according to the brand of the EMR. Okay, so these are your popular brand, and these all together will become personalized according to that particular hospital. Okay, business is a competitive market. It is a free enterprise. Okay, so you all being in the health information management field, health information technology field, you are the administrators of that. You help run the business. You help make sure everything stays in compliance, lady. Okay, that's you, Miss Compliance. You help make sure everything stays in compliance. And so we have to know, okay, nurses, do y'all like this? If you all like this, then let us help you design it. Why do we need to help you design this? Because we have to make sure in case we are audited by HEDIS, we know how to answer for it. We know all where your information is. Are y'all getting this? Okay, fantastic. All right, me loves. That was our design process. Implementation was another matter. Our methodology of bringing one unit online at a time allowed us to provide plenty of support when the unit went online. Okay, so that's part of the implementation process. They work with the nursing unit. Then the nurses have to work with the doctors.
They're working now?
I heard it on, and this came on. Look and see. The printer was on. Yeah, the printer is working. Yeah. Let me look at the, let me look. Oh, it's on.
That's good.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So the nurses have to help the doctors do what they need to do. Okay. Clinical informatics, which is another big thing coming on the rise. So you ladies, I would not be surprised as y'all matriculate in this, as you move up in hospital revenue, coding and everything, that you might find some physicians and nurses coming out of the clinical aspect wanting to get into your jobs. Because they find an interest in doing electronical IT stuff, administrative stuff. Sometimes it starts off like that. They just evolve. They come from patient care and they say, you know what, I did my just do. I think I just want to do this. I just want to sit in front of the computer all day. I have the knowledge to know what needs to be in the chart and what's being audited. I just want to sit in front of the computer all day. I don't want to do patient care. Okay? All right. Clinical informatics personnel schedule in shifts that overlap the nursing shifts. And we help with that process, the health information management department. We help with that. We have to help know how much downtime we need. We have to help them realize how much money are we losing if we're taking people off shifts. So we play a very critical role in the HR part of things as well. So if y'all choose to go higher in this, be open to HR stuff too. Okay. All right. We were in the unit with the nurses 24 hours a day for the first 2 weeks. Whenever new users are struggling, someone was right at their elbow to calmly guide them through to make sure they were successful. Even with that level of support, there were some concerns that remained constant through the last unit of the rollout. Nurses are very accustomed to being in control, confident in their expertise and their skills. When their department becomes computerized, all of a sudden, everything they know has to be translated through the limitations of the computer. The most common reactions when we roll out charting into a new unit was that the nurses were extremely apprehensive their first day of charting. The universal complaint was that they could not sleep the night before. My experience was that at the end of the first day that they were still not feeling good about it. But when they came back to the second day, they had figured out how to get through it and they had very few questions. By the third day, they were usually doing very well. They still did not feel confident about finding the information, but they knew they could do it. So we have to help encourage nurses. You have to help encourage people through change, okay? Because sometimes we all don't like what? Change. We don't like change. Change is good. Change is good. Okay. The nurses' biggest fear was that they would spend all their time taking care of the computer instead of their patients. They were verbalized that idea for months afterwards, but it is not reality. Research has repeatedly shown that nurses spend to 70% of their time documenting. In short, nurses already spend an enormous amount of their work life documenting, but it takes them a long time to feel like they were spending less time on the computer than on their patients. The real issue is that they felt like they were cut off from the information. They could not just flip open a chart and see what they were looking for. They had to remember how to find it. Highlight that. You have to remember how to find it. Okay, and that was the time out of their day. I had them, I have, I have had them cry. I have had them to yell, venting their frustration. But the good part was that they were all in the same boat together. So their peers really understood what they were going through because they were going through it together. The nurses who had the easiest time transitioning were nurses who were accustomed to taking the time to write everything down as they went through their workday. The majority of nurses do not do that. Most nurses have notes stuffed in their pockets and tons of information in their head. They tend to store it up and write it all down when they came back from lunch or at the end of their shift. Danger. Um, when they try to follow the same model with the computer, they are not yet comfortable with the computer. It is twice as hard because they have a lot to remember and they have to figure it out what to do with it. Nurses whom normally charted as their day progressed did not have to remember as much, so they seemed to learn faster. In nursing schools, nurses have to chart as it happens. Instructors insist on it. This meant that nurses who just came out of nursing school had an advantage because they came into the job with good habits. Additionally, most of the new nurses grew up with computers and were more familiar with them. We have found that the ancillary departments, respiratory therapy, physical therapy, dietary, and so on, were also easy to implement. Their documentation is much more concrete, limited in its focus. So it was much easier to adapt from paper to computer. They were almost self-sufficient from the very beginning. The doctors, however, oh my goodness, were another story. You have to spend time upfront making sure the doctors can get through the information, and most doctors cannot give up enough time in their day to learn a computer. The nurses train for 8 hours for a computer, but the doctors only for about 15 minutes. We balance this by trying to be attentive to any doctor who came on the floor. We would often say, let me help you find the information. The nurses are now charting on the computer. As of today, you are not going to find that information on a piece of paper. We don't print anything. The doctors have to adapt to the readily available information so well that on the rare occasion when we have downtime, it is usually the physicians who are the most upset. One thing I think is important is the nursing leadership to dedicate time to learning the system. So it's important for members are fully on board with why to switch from computers is happening and what benefits are. Then, when their staff is apprehensive or when the physicians are frustrated because the nurses have not charted, their reinforcement from the management and computerized charting is an expectation. This point was illustrated in two of the units we were rolled out. In one unit, the leadership was very computer savvy and expected the staff to do well. Leadership members held reinforcing in-service programs every 10 days, and they would have us to talk about specific areas where they thought their staff was weak in charting. Because, and we have to talk about it with physicians too. We're going to talk about that in a little bit because we have an area in the HIM department where we let the HIM director know. The HIM director talks with the chief of staff, the physician, about the conduct, the documentation conduct, and the electronic medical record conduct, and sometimes the paper-based conduct of them documenting, and they're not signing off on stuff. And they are causing us to be, what's the D word? Not discrepancy. What's the D word for being late? Delinquent. Thank you. Causing us to be delinquent. Okay. Then when their staff is apprehensive or when the physicians are frustrated because the nurses have not charted, there is a reinforcement from the management that computerized charting is an expectation. This point was illustrated in two of the units we wrote out. In one unit, the leadership was very computer savvy and expected the staff to do well. Leadership members held reinforcement in-service programs every 10 days, and they would have us talk about specific areas where they thought their staff was weak in charting. Because the nurse manager was so proactive, the whole area adapted very easily, and as a result, the physicians adapted very easily. In another unit where the nurse manager was not very computer savvy, the manager's apprehension reinforced that of the staff. For that reason, our team found it necessary to support them. Although this unit has been online for a long time, there is still a core group of nurses who just do not understand it because the leaders do not require them to do it. Ooh, bad example. One final benefit of an involved leadership is that it results in better charting. When we did the first units, the implementation spent a lot of time reading the document for quality, seeing if the nurses forgot to chart something, and so on. However, as the rollout continued throughout the hospital, the implementation team could not really spend a lot of time reviewing. You really need the people who knows the patient population of the unit, the leaders, the managers, or supervisors to be spending time each day randomly selecting charts created by the nurses, reading them, and helping the nurses understand if they are not doing it thoroughly enough. This does not only improve the quality of the charts, but it also helps the staff get better at it quickly. Very good. What do you ladies think about the transition of electronic medical records from paper to electronic? What do you all think about that? Better, good, more sufficient, very good. Now, when change comes, and let's suppose all three of you are electronic medical record specialists, okay? How are you going to um, assist with the clinical staff in doing their job? How do you think? Reading the information, shadowing them, helping them guide it through. Okay. So when all of those documentation comes back to us and we read the notes, we have to make sure that everything is written clearly. You know, make sure that like we do in grammar school, what? Subject, verb, or what? Agreement. Okay, I have to make sure that the notes are written to make sense. We learn the medical terminology that the words are put together to what? Make sense. Okay, so you have to make sure that it makes sense in the content of the sentence structure. Okay, so it's kind of mixing up a little bit of grammar school with medical terminology in your health careers. Okay, so and then you as electronic medical record specialist, documentation specialist, if you find questionable things in the SOAP notes, please let your supervisors in the health information management department know. Okay, not every single thing, but if you find it to be a high trend from a particular nurse or a particular physician, it's not that you're getting them in trouble. It's just that you're trying to help them to be a little bit more better at their documentation and be a little bit more attentive. Okay, and again, sometimes they have those special scribes there, and it's the patient care techs. They're in the hospitals. They're known as CNAs, certified nursing assistants, but they're either patient care techs or patient care assistants. And medical assistants, they can transition from a doctor's office to a hospital as a patient care tech or a patient care assistant as well. They usually have them do all the documentation at times too. Okay, so you may want to kind of get with them to help talk to the nurses, to help talk to the doctors, you know. So you have to kind of know how to work the people system. Okay, so let's look at the exercises. Ooh, this one is pretty lengthy. Bless y'all hearts. Okay, let's see here. So what Miss Harper is going to do, I'm going to let y'all go ahead and get your computers. And I'm going to let y'all, ooh, it's 10:15. I'm going to let y'all work on your your first exercise. And I'll give y'all to about 11:30. Said meaningful use. We'll talk about meaningful use on Monday. That way I have a full day to talk about it. Yeah, meaningful use is on page 8. So I'm definitely going to touch up on that on Monday. I'm going to write myself a note. Today's Wednesday. Today is Wednesday. And thank you for my sanitizer, sweetness. Thank you. I was like, who left me this? They know me. Yes, I have to have it. I eat that Kentucky Fried Chicken and lick my fingers and be forgetting. Girl, you're going to be sick in the next 5 minutes. You better stop that. You're going to be sick in the next 5 minutes. I forgot I still had this rolling. Thank you. See you later.